But if you are writing something which you were like, I actively don't think that a straight audience are going to primarily enjoy, then yeah, you're going to write a queer book in a slightly different way. Then I think, like, I don't want to put assumptions on anyone else's methodology in their mouth, as it were. But like, take say a book like Steve Fox and Todd Darrell's Cheetah Code, which just came out. Brilliant book. It's kind of like an end of romance, sex, fantasy around video games kind of book, and it's very queer. It's specifically very gay male audiences, and it's brilliant and it's absolutely superb. But I would wonder like how much of a straight audience would find it accessible. There's certainly plenty in there which I think a straight audience could relate to, but there's also going to be plenty there which I think would immediately turn off some audiences, and that's fine. That's fine to do. You have to, in a way, know your audience. If you're not looking to appeal to a general audience, then sure, write your book that way.
Let's talk nerdy things, yeah, like comic books and superheroes, with some nerdy picks, yeah, writers, cartoonists, and so much more. Whoa, yeah, so stick around and have some fun with the lovely and adorable Evil Web. Evil Web.
Hello, my sweet ones. Welcome to Titular Characters. I am your adorable host, Eva Webb. I'm here today with the writer of Pride, Acceptable Losses, and soon Glitter Vipers, the incomparable Joe Glass. How are you, Joe?
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very well, thanks. Just about surviving the Christmas period.
Nice. Yeah, Christmas in quarantine is not what you would expect from Christmas. It's kind of quiet, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of lucky in that I live at home with my family anyway. So for me, it's kind of actually not been that different. Obviously, the main thing is just everyone outside. You know, it's been quiet outside, which is unusual. But certainly at home, like I'm at home with my family, just like I would be every Christmas. So so far, our Christmas hasn't really been that different, to be honest.
Oh, that's
Which I'm
fantastic.
aware makes me a very lucky individual. I know there's so many people out there who obviously aren't able to make those connections with their families in the traditional way. But yeah, it's been okay. The weirdest thing is, like, say, just being aware that nothing's really happening outside the house, as it were. And
Oh,
there's been
sure.
a few family members we couldn't see, so.
Right on. So I guess we can start in with the questions. Some of these are exciting. So you have been you started with sort of writing about the comics industry, and then you wrote Pride and Acceptable Losses, and you went on to become one of the major queer voices in comics today. How does that feel?
Wow. I mean, hearing that description of me as a major queer voice in comics is still something which is really odd to think about. It's really weird. It's something which I've sort of had to come to get to terms with. I think like the big moment for me was when my Twitter following reached like 5,000 followers. And then that was when I realized, oh, hey, that's actually a lot of people. So that means that in theory, there's a lot of people hearing what I have to say. So that's kind of when I really started to accept that, oh, actually, maybe I am not a big deal. That's not what I want to say. That's really big-headed. But like, there are more people out there who are paying attention to me than if I was just, from when I was starting out, which is super weird to get used to because, like, for me, like, I still live at home. I still work a day job. I don't feel like anything's changed in my life. So it's so weird to think that I've got to this position, but like it's something I've had to sort of come to understand and accept. Like it's even now to the point where there's more people paying attention to me and sort of listening to what I have to say, I guess, than when I was writing about comics. Because obviously I was writing with Pride and doing the comics journalism reporting side of things. kind of side by side. I actually started with the Pride. There was actually about 3 issues out by the time I started working with Bleeding Cool. But then, and like that came about in a kind of roundabout way. And then like I was doing the 2 things like simultaneously, and then releasing like the first collection of the Pride, and then left Bleeding Cool and sort of got picked up to do a second season of the Pride with ComiXology and did Acceptable Losses on Kickstarter. And obviously just done Glitter Vipers now, which published earlier in the year now. It would have been about September, I think. So yeah, it's been kind of crazy to think, but like I'm now someone who's got about 20 comics out in the world. Obviously, like only the 3 titles, as it were, but like 20 essentially single issues, etc. And all these people following me, which is just like, oh, right, okay, I guess people did like what I had to say, I guess. So yeah, it's very unusual.
Right on. Well, you are a lot of fun to follow on Twitter. I will say that.
Thank you very much. It's mainly because I think I have no filter. Like I've never really understood. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like taboos. I like for things to be like, oh, you don't talk about that. We don't discuss that. And that's always struck me as odd. So like I have no filter in that respect. So like when I'm online, I kind of just say what's in my head, which may get me in trouble sometimes, or may get me in people's bad books in certain publishers or whatever. But at the end of the day, I always try to say something which I think is like not punching down and which I feel like needs to be said. And like it's kind of, if anything, often trying to put like people in a position of power in check. Like I never want to be seen to be abusing my power in any way. So, or whatever power is, whatever. So it's always a case of I always take a second to think about what I'm saying, like what the possible consequences, who might be affected, etc., like that. But like 9 times out of 10, I might be like making a fake criticism or fake comment about Marvel, and I'm like, yeah, they are a position of power way above me in the industry. I'm not punching down if I discuss something that they've done wrong or done well. Like because that's the thing. I think people this started actually when I worked at Bleeding Cool. People seem to have it in their heads that I didn't like Marvel, and I was going out and I was attacking them all the time, and stuff like that. But that was never the case. Like I actually love Marvel. I'm actually, if anyone who really knows me actually knows I'm a complete Marvel zombie. So like my adoration, however, does not include being blind to when they're not quite doing things right or when they're not living up to their responsibility with the position that they have. So like I don't believe in loving something uncritically, because for me that's not loving something, that's obsessing with something, and that's not the same thing. So for me, that's kind of what I do and treat things online. So if I'm criticizing something, it's often something I care about a lot and something I really love. So I will, be critical of it when it needs to be criticized. But likewise, I will talk about things which are they doing well and which I love a lot more. It's just the nature of the internet is people latch on to the negative more than they do the positive a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I think you've seen probably more of that than most of us.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, not just from a sense of sort of seeing that happening in the industry, but also obviously being a bit of a target of it sometimes. Like, say, even beyond like what I'd already mentioned, where someone might be thinking that I'm just critical, that I'm out to get someone or some company or whatever, but also various groups who maybe shan't be named to give them the respect of a platform which they don't deserve. So yeah, like
Yeah.
I've sadly been on the receiving end of some of that as well. So yeah, it's really weird actually, that one, because it's kind of, I get talked to about that a lot. For a while sometimes I was worried, like, is this why I'm becoming famous in the industry and becoming a voice, because people know I've spoken up about them or speak up to them. And certainly, like, when I was writing Bleeding Cool, wrote articles about how they were not a good thing. But I kind of feel like that's not what I want for me to be known as, I would hope that my work is more important and speaks louder than that kind of stuff anyway. But as well as that, like, I'll get people sometimes like really big names in the industry who are thanking me for my bravery or whatever in standing up to these guys. And I'm just like, guys, I don't get it that bad. Like, there are people out there, and by people I largely mean women, who get it a lot worse than I do. Like, I'm still, at the end of the day, a white cis man. I never got it. I got it bad, don't get me wrong. And certainly for my own mental health, like, there were steps and actions I had to take. But there are people who you could see were getting it a lot worse than me. And those people tended to be women, particularly trans women, and people of color. And I'm just like, well, that kind of says everything,
It totally does. It totally does. I'm sorry for bringing that up, even accidentally.
It's one of those things where, like I say, like I kind of don't want that to be what I'm known for in the industry, but at the same time, I know that it's something which I have done, and that is a part of my trajectory and my path or whatever. So I know it's going to come up. So it's never something I feel anyone needs to apologize for if they want to ask me a question about it. And like I say, I welcome it sometimes, because there are, particularly amongst other voices in the industry, and particularly other white cis male voices, and especially if they're straight as well, who, because they are not always the targets, often miss a lot of it. And sometimes they just don't know what's happening because they can't. It's not in their circle that they're seeing it. So like a lot of people sometimes would jump to be like, "Why haven't you said this about this already?" And it's just like, well, they might not know. It sounds amazing to think like there are people out there who maybe don't know what's going on, but it's just like, well, yeah, if you're not a target of it, then it's quite easy to be blind to it and just assume that everyone's playing nice.
Yeah, that's true. So, what was there a moment where you said to yourself, I want to write comics?
Kind of, yeah. It kind of initially started as a moment where I was like, I want to draw comics, actually. And like that moment was also a case of like telling my own stories. But my main idea was I want to be a comic artist, was my initial thoughts. And that would have been like when I was around probably about 13, 14. That was when I really like decided like this is what I want to do or want to pursue in some way. And then like in my sixth form, which is kind of like the senior years of high school, I did art. And for part of that was I had to have like an end of year project, and I decided, right, I'm going to make a comic. And like total teen, first thinking of it, not knowing what the hell I was doing kind of thing. Like I was like, oh yeah, this project starts and we've got 4 months to do by the end of year. Yeah, I can do a whole comic in that time. So needless to say, by the end of the time submitted for my grade was a single page and a bunch of designs. And it was around that time where I realized that I'm no artist. I can draw fairly competently enough, but I'm not a sequential artist. I don't have that skill. But like at the same time, I was also doing like English and studying English literature. And I knew from a very young age, way before comics, that I liked telling stories. So it became an easy transition to be like, well, hey, if I can't draw them, then I know at least I can write them. And then that became my focus, is just trying to hone that craft then.
Yeah, that's fabulous. So you wrote Pride, and the reception was very positive. Do you feel like you engaged with a lot of fans over that one?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, but Pride was a long journey for me because it started off as a very personal project, which I didn't think I was ever going to publish. I kind of started coming up with scenes and characters back when I was like 15, 16, and was loving comic books and reading comic books, but also coming into my own as a gay man and sort of not really feeling like I saw myself as visible in the books. So like I created characters like Fabman and Wolf back then, like when I was like 16, 17 years old. I think the first scene which I wrote was the Fabman Wolf scene, and then Twink from issue 1 of the Pride. So I wrote that probably when I was around the 17, 18 mark. And like these just sat in my computers for years, just slowly chipping away, working on them, honing characters, stories, what did I want to see, etc. But I kind of always felt like no one wanted to hear this. Felt like maybe this is just me. So I didn't bother making it. And then when I was in my early 20s, I was living with some guys, some my closest friends, Drew Davis and PJ Montgomery, and we were working on a comic of our own, which we were co-writing, called Stiffs. And they came into my room one day when I was writing The Pride. I think I was probably finishing up the first issue then, and really like putting it to bed kind of thing. And they read it and they loved it, and they like really pushed for me. They were like, dude, you should make this. You should actually like get it published. So that's where that sort of began. Gavin Mitchell, who was actually the artist on Stiffs as well, and I coaxed him into doing The Pride too. And then like from there, we printed things, we published things, and the rest is history, as it were. And then like when we started out, like we'd go out and do shows. We'd always do shows all together. Like we'd have one table and be like all four of us behind it kind of thing. And we'd have the two books. There'd be Stiffs and The Pride on there. And when we started out, Stiffs was the much more popular book, and it gained like a very strong fan base very quickly. And I think that was because it was around the time that the Walking Dead TV show was starting. And Stiffs is a horror comedy set in the South Wales Valleys, but which kind of revolved around zombies. So it kind of like had that sort of moment in the Sunday with everything sort of leaning in its favor. And The Pride was liked and people were like positive about it, but it was kind of like very small at that start. And then maybe by the time we got to like the third or fourth issue, I think that was around the time I'd started submitting them to ComiXology on their ComiXology Submit platform, where like, what's the word I'm about? Yeah, independent individual creators can submit their independent work to ComiXology to be on the platform. So you didn't need a publisher as such, etc. So that seemed to do, but the price started to do really well on there. And around that point, then things seemed to turn at Comic Cons as well. But like The Pride was a much more popular book. We'd have more people coming up to the table asking about The Pride. And obviously, like, it got to a point where we had to like separate the tables. Like we had to create like a Pride table, which I'd run, and the guys would run the Stiffs table. And then like, you know, we started working on our own projects eventually. Stiffs was a great book, but sadly never quite got that level of regular readership that would keep it alive. So it's sort of been in indefinite hiatus for years now. Whereas The Pride just like seemed to go from strength to strength, which was great. And like it meant that people were coming up to my tables, and sometimes they would just never heard of The Pride and were just super excited to see. And if anyone who's ever seen me at a con would be able to attest to this incredibly flamboyant, bright table covered in rainbows, sometimes glitter and sequins as well. Sometimes even with a guy stood behind there who's also covered in glitter and sequins, just making for this really. Yeah, I just figure like I feel really comfortable when I'm making like a really flamboyant statement visually in my appearance. Like I like obviously it's not how I dress like every single day, but like if I'm doing a show, I'm gonna do a show. So yeah, I'm like the Elton John of comics. So yeah, I'll just be in some loud outfits, some shiny glasses, the works. But yeah, so people would come up and see this table, and they'd be like super excited to see this superhero book, which was super queer. And like I'd engage with that, and I was even then getting people sharing their stories. In that they, you know, about how, you know, they found themselves, you know, they dealt with their own queerness and coming out stories, but then also people who picked up The Pride at maybe a previous show and been telling me about how much they loved it, how much it spoke to them, and how much it meant to them. And that was when I started sort of really realizing that this book isn't just for you anymore. Like there are other people out there who wanted this whole time, and no one's been catering to them. Like I think it's not to say that there aren't queer comics out there, because they absolutely are. But like one of the things I was doing with Pride is it's an accessible comic which could be read by anyone who's part of any part of the queer spectrum, or even straight readers, and pretty much at any age. There's nothing particularly graphic in it. There's nothing too sexual, nothing too sweary. We kind of try to. The way I view it is like it's of the same maturity level as your standard Avengers or Justice League comic, and it was superheroes. And queer comics, there are very few independent superhero books, and people clearly wanted it. They were like really excited about it and loved the characters. And so as I've gone on, it's just got bigger and bigger. And like even now, I see people discovering The Pride for the first time and getting super excited because they feel like it was something they wanted, which was never being provided. Like I just did a post on Twitter, like a sneaky Christmas treat, where I posted a piece of art by Luciano Vecchio, who's done some redesigns of some of the characters. I can't really say why or where these redesigns have come from or for what reason, but there are some redesigns by Luciano Vecchio out there, and I shared them on Twitter, and people went nuts for it. And like, there was this one tweet where someone was just going like, "Oh my god, I need to hear everything about that guy in the middle." So it's still one of those things where people find it and they just really enthusiastic about it. So it's been really awesome to try and engage with more and try to be like, I see you, because I probably was you at some point, and like I'm going to try my best to be there for you in a way which I didn't feel like there was someone for me at that age, you know?
Oh, totally. I grew up in the 90s, and when I was a kid, there was no queer or trans representation or gay representation of any kind
Mm-hmm.
in comics, and seeing Pride just available in a normal marketplace, as a normal book, that was a milestone. I got so excited about it.
Yeah, I'm super excited for next June when now obviously the series got picked up by ComiXology Originals and therefore became like, and we did a new season under that, etc. It's now obviously Dark Horse are doing the print versions of those ComiXology Originals books, and they're going to do this awesome omnibus which will collect all the story of the Pride. So Pride Season 1, Pride Season 2, and Pride Adventures Season 1 all into one gorgeous huge book. It's something like, it's just shy of like 500 pages, I think. It's literally going to be massive. And that's going to be in like bookstores and comic shops around the world. And like, that is like that one step I still hadn't quite properly broken. So to see it now coming up to that stage where it's going to be that accessible, and that like a queer, nerdy guy could just walk into a comic shop and see this incredibly gay looking book on the shelf with these awesome queer superheroes, that feels absolutely amazing to me, because I'm just like, I wanted that so much when I was a teenager.
Oh God, yeah, I did too. And that sounds just fabulous. Also, the Luciano, I remember the Luciano Vecchio, or is it Vecchio or Vizio?
I think it's Vecchio. I could be wrong. It's one of those things where like, I try to pride myself on getting everyone's pronunciation right, because the way I think of it is like, if they can pronounce my name right, then it's only fair that I try my best to pronounce their name right. So I am very aware that I could be getting his wrong there, for which I apologize, Luch. But yeah, I think it's Vecchio, but I would want to double check with them just to be sure.
So, to my listeners out there who are listening to this show, this is some of the best fan art you're ever going to see. It's really, really cool. My favorite was the one where it was Pied Piper and Fury sort of in a fight.
Oh, yeah, that was a really good one, yeah.
I really liked that.
I guess they're like a series of fan art depictions. He does a lot of them. He does all characters, really, but he's got like a lot of focus on queer characters. And it's not just awesome, but I feel this is coming from me, and I think that I'm pretty good on the subject, but like Luciano's knowledge of queer superheroes, particularly in mainstream superhero comic books like Marvel, DC, is encyclopedic. Like, he occasionally will even draw a character who I'm like, I've literally never heard of this character before. And then I will read something about them and I'm like, I want to write a story about these characters. Like, how do I get to do that book at DC?
Yeah, that's awesome. So one question I really wanted to ask you is, what makes for good representation in comics?
It's hard to say, I think, because I think everyone has their own kind of ideas. Like, I mean, even in the Pride, like, the reception's been incredibly positive, but that's not to say there hasn't been negatives out there. And there were some even from the queer community who didn't like the idea of this very flamboyant camp character, in particular, who's in one of the leading roles. So, like, I think everyone has slightly different ideas of what would count as good representation. I think the main thing is that the character it's not necessarily that it isn't a stereotype, because here's something I personally believe in, which is, I think, fairly evident in the Pride, is that stereotypes aren't inherently bad. It's how stereotypes are used, which is inherently bad. stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, and that is because they're made up of things which are seen often. They are common things which are part of it. But like say, that's not to say that all stereotypes are equal, and that's not to say that all stereotypes are used in a positive way. For example, like say, with that man, say the stereotype of him as being this really campy, sort of flamboyant, over the top gay guy, and that is good to have in my mind because like I can be pretty camp and flamboyant. It is kind of based on some friends of mine who are very camp and flamboyant. I'm like, their voices deserve to be heard just as much as any other kind of gay guys. But at the same time, for years, that kind of stereotype was used in the media in a detrimental way because it sort of codified gay men as these harmless, foolish, sort of clown type characters, usually sexless sort of ideas of men as well. And it was this kind of, it tried to make gay men into something which was harmless and palatable to a straight audience. And I think that actually probably is the core of what makes good representation, is when you are writing that character, whether you yourself are part of that community or not part of that community, who are you writing that character for? And if you are writing, say, a black character designed to be accessible for white people, then that's not great representation. You're actually underserving the community that you're claiming to want to represent. Similar for like me with the queer characters, and the queer characters who come from aspects of the LGBTQI spectrum that I'm not part of. That was always my focus, is like making sure that I am writing these characters for those aspects of the community and not about them or sort of like making them in any way sort of digestible to people who weren't part of that aspect of the community. So often I will talk to friends who are trans or who are asexual and sort of be like, hey, so this is what I'm thinking of doing. Does this work? Like, how would you broach it? And kind of things like that. And I think that's something which any company and any creator should be doing if they're writing about communities which they're not part of, is you should be communicating with them and inviting them to be part of it. And even if it's an uncredited kind of just like, hey, we just want you to give us feedback and just be like, let us know if we're overstepping the mark here or something. That is at least doing something. Whereas like you see so many attempts where it's pretty clear that no attempt of communicating with that community was ever made. And that is what leads then to bad representation, because not that such a character necessarily could then never be sort of taken back and sort of improved, but like kind of it's not necessary. It's just not a good show, you know? Like, for example, look at like a character from DC like Extraño, who when he initially debuted was pretty much hated by the gay community. Pretty certain there were no queer people involved in his creation. That he was just kind of, oh, yeah, we should have a queer character. Let's just do this. And he was absolutely all the stereotypes you can imagine, but like used in a not negative way. Like they weren't actively making fun of that group, but they were like not really being honest or really showing that group. Like they weren't even being honest or showing what flamboyant queer men are like. It was just all the sort of ideas thrown into a bucket. Decades later, Steve Orlando comes along and he picks up the character, and suddenly Extraño is this really exciting and interesting DC character. Obviously ditched a lot of what that original incarnation looked like, primarily, than anything else. But then like he completely rehabilitated the character to make him someone that queer audiences are actually excited to read about. Because he took that character who wasn't really designed for queer audiences. He was just sort of made about queer audiences, but not even actively engaging with them in any kind of way. And he rehabilitated that character to be for that community instead. So yeah, it's I think that's the main thing to always be borne in mind when trying to represent a community through a character or through a story, is you should be engaging with them and make sure that you are writing for them. That's not to say that when you're writing for that group, you're not writing for the general audience or for other groups as well. People see that kind of discussion as being like it's a pie or something. Like you give someone a slice and that's one less slice for everyone else. And it's like, well, no, that's That's not how it works. This equality and representation, it isn't a pie. Like, it's literally, you can write that to serve that community properly, but it's also perfectly accessible to everyone else. But if you are writing it where you're not considering that, then that's where you fail, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, completely. That's actually really, really insightful.
Oh, thank you. I do worry sometimes that when I start talking about that kind of stuff, I'm just waffling and just saying random stuff.
Oh no, no, this is brilliant, Joe. Thank you.
Oh.
So, do you think there's a difference? I mean, other than what we obviously just discussed, between writing a comic for a general audience and writing something that would be labeled as maybe a queer comic?
Not necessarily. Like, it kind of depends what kind of story you're trying to tell. I mean, if you were trying to write something which is for a queer audience, but then also accessible to anyone else, then no. You can just think about writing for a general audience, but just bearing in mind that there's specific audiences in mind that you want to feel included. And what would you do to do that? And like the easiest part of that is invite them to be part of it, you know? But if you are writing something which you were like, I actively don't think that a straight audience are going to primarily enjoy, then yeah, you're going to write a queer book in a slightly different way. Then I think, like, I don't want to put assumptions on anyone else's methodology in their mouth, as it were. But like, take say a book like Steve Fox and Todd Darrell's Cheetah Code, which just came out. Brilliant book. It's kind of like an end of romance, sex, fantasy around video games kind of book, and it's very queer. It's specifically very gay male audiences, and it's brilliant and it's absolutely superb. But I would wonder like how much of a straight audience would find it accessible. There's certainly plenty in there which I think a straight audience could relate to, but there's also going to be plenty there which I think would immediately turn off some audiences, and that's fine. That's fine to do. You have to, in a way, know your audience. If you're not looking to appeal to a general audience, then sure, write your book that way. But if you are looking to do something which appeals to a specific audience, but is also accessible to the general audience, then there's not really much different that you actually need to do than if you were just writing for a general audience. You're just adding that little element into the recipe.
That's fantastic. Do you mind if I ask you what you're reading right now?
Right now, I'm actually doing a reread of Kieran Gillen and Jimmy McKelvey AL's run on Young Avengers, which I'm loving, like just like I did the first time. Like, it's one of the best runs on a superhero comic I've ever read. So yeah, I'm doing a bit of a reread of that at the moment. I'm actually reading the Mabinogion for research, which is a collection of like Welsh fables and folklore, which is research for a story I'm hoping to get started next year. But yeah, I'm reading some other stuff as well. But yeah, generally the big things at the moment, Mabinogion and a reread of Young Avengers at the moment. Oh, and obviously all the usual weekly comics. Like, in terms of weekly comics, like I've been picking up the big ones that are Immortal Hulk, which I just think is genius. Al Ewing can do no wrong.
Right.
Oh, it's super. The entire Krakoan era of the X-Men run as well. Like, I love pretty much every one of the books in that at the moment, which is again very Marvel centric. So see, I do love Marvel. And James Tynion's run on Batman is superb. I think it's going to go down as one of the all-time greats. So yeah, there's the usual kind of stuff as well. The big indie ones, it's going to sound like I'm on just a James Tynion kick here. So Department of Truth, Wind, and Something is Killing the Children, which are all written by James Tynion with various different artists, are all absolutely essential and fantastic reads. So yeah, I think we're actually going through a bit of a renaissance of independent comic series, which is really awesome. I think there's like so many exciting new books coming out lately, which are not Marvel and DC, which are actually like Image or Boom or Vault, that it's just so cool to see. So, and there's so much. There's just so much which I want to read. But yeah, some I'm reading weekly, and some I'm like, I'm gonna have to wait for trade because I've literally got no money.
I know, and there aren't enough hours in the day to read it all. I mean,
Oh, I
like,
know, right?
trying to keep up. I'm trying to keep up with the Ahoy books right now, and they're
Mm,
releasing them a mile a minute. You know,
I know, and like,
it's
and they're releasing some really good stuff as well. Like the Second Coming books are just superb. So it's just, yeah, there's just so many good books coming from so many places at the moment. But I do think it's a lot of it is coming from independent publishers in particular. Marvel, not that Marvel and DC are putting out some exciting stuff. They absolutely are, and I think they've got more exciting stuff coming down the line, which is awesome, which I'm excited to see. But yeah, I think like we're really seeing that almost renaissance in the actual independent sector of comic books, which is awesome.
you know what it feels like. It's like for years, for generations, really. You'd have to go overseas to get the weird French or Asian books.
Mm.
You know, all kinds of stuff. I mean, art styles that would just blow your mind. And now lately, I mean, for the last few years anyway, it really feels like all of that stuff has been just filtering into the American market
Oh yeah.
and sort of breeding and intermixing in strange and fascinating and creative ways. It's really amazing to watch, and I think the comics are completely different now in
Mm.
this than they've ever been before, at least in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I'm particularly like from publishers like Ahoy, like you mentioned, and like Vault, bit of books which they're putting out, which I can't say I've ever seen anything like them. And that is exciting. That's more interesting than anything else. To me, like books like These Savage Shores and Friendo and Giga have just been such excellent stories. And like, I can't think of anyone else doing books like those than Vault at the moment. So it's really exciting to see these kind of very different stories, and publishers who are willing to take that risk on them. It makes me very hopeful that maybe one of these days, one of these publishers will take a risk on me.
I'm sure they were. I'm sure they will. So you've got a new project called Glitter Vipers, and it's coming out, and there's going to be a Kickstarter for it, I understand.
Yeah, Kickstarter actually been and went. It was in, God, I want to say July of this year. So it was like right in the middle of lockdown. Is that right? Or was it earlier? But it was during lockdown. So it was really interesting to run this campaign when literally nothing else was happening in this country. Like I at the time I was furloughed from my day job as well. So it was just kind of a case of like, all I've got really to do is focus on this Kickstarter, which was great and scary at the same time. But yeah, thankfully Glitter Vipers seemed super popular. People were like immediately taken by the title and the logo alone, which was pretty awesome. But we finally got the books printed, so we sort of released them back in September. It's on ComiXology now as well, and the books are available on my website if people like them in print, etc. But yeah, the book is out. It's been getting like a lot. Every feedback I get of it is super positive. Like, I've yet to have anyone go like, I didn't really like it, which is awesome. Not to blow one's own trumpet. Katie Fleming's art is absolutely gorgeous in it. Kelly Fitzpatrick colors, Lucas Cotone's letters, like everyone really pulled their like A+ game out on this book, and I think you can feel it in the story. Like, it feels like there's a lot of heart in it. It just looks gorgeous as well. So it's been really exciting to have it come out this year when a lot of other things behind the scenes kind of got put onto the back burner or put on ice, probably until 2021 at least. So it was nice to see that come out. The one thing I got is, because obviously that was all done independently without a publisher and through Kickstarter, my typical method of pushing that kind of book is not available to me. Like, it would be Comic Cons usually. I'm much better at selling myself and my work in person than I am like over the internet kind of thing. So that has been very difficult to handle. I've got like a lot of these books ready, and I would love to take them to a Comic Con and rave about them at a show, etc. But they just kind of sit in waiting for everything to really sort of pick up again. But that being said, if anyone did want to order any online, they're on my website in my shop, and I can absolutely post them out. So yeah, it's available now to anyone who wants it, and it's a story I was really excited to tell because it's a bit different from The Pride. Not just because there's no superheroes in it, but also I think it was the way I sort of I was talking to Tate Brombal, and like the I can't remember who came up with the phrase first, but like when we were talking about it, this phrase felt like, oh, this is absolutely what the difference is between the Pride and Glitter Vipers. And if the Pride was about gay pride, then Glitter Vipers is about gay wrath. So that's kind of what the difference is between books as well.
That sounds really exciting.
I hope so. Like I say, everyone was really excited about it when we started the Kickstarter, which was awesome. It actually wound up being my second most successful Kickstarter to date, only going behind the Pride hardcover edition when I'd initially collected the first volumes of the Pride. So yeah, it's my second most successful Kickstarter. People were like really into the idea from pretty much get go. So yeah, it's been exciting to see how it goes. I'm most excited to see how it will go down when we get Comic Cons back again. And same for Acceptable Losses, actually, because Acceptable Losses, we actually got back from printers in February, just before everything locked down because of the pandemic. So technically, Acceptable Losses hasn't been at a Comic Con yet either. So when it comes to Comic Cons again, like we're going to start up, and when I do my first show with a table, I'm going to have at least 2 brand new books on that table, which no one's ever seen before, which is going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Joe, it is nearing the end of our show, and I wanted to ask you the questions I ask everybody because I just get such great answers from people. So, who is your inner superhero? What does that person look like? And how cool is their costume?
I think for me, like if my inner superhero identity is probably doesn't look that different from me. They probably, which sounds really big headed, but like bear with me, I'm getting to the really deprecating bits. They're probably just a little bit more in shape. Like I'm fairly body positive in how I look, etc. But like I'm also aware that I'm not the healthiest of people. So like the superhero version of me in my mind would be a bit healthier, be a bit more in shape, would have an incredibly loud costume. It would be like you would see me a mile coming, and there would definitely be glitter elements. I'm pretty certain there would be makeup involved more than there would a mask, and I would also have hair. I am a bald man who constantly misses having hair, so I would probably have shoulder-length, luxurious blonde hair.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
So think like a really gay version of a Sentry, probably.
Oh, I love it. Oh my God. That's beautiful. Can I have my artist draw that? She's going to be listening to this show.
Oh, feel free. Like, that's fine. Like super gay, super flamboyant Sentry with a bit of a dad bod.
Oh, that is fabulous. Oh my God. Oh, that would be great. So what kind of powers? Do you have Sentry powers, or do you have a different and unique power set to you?
I mean, I think for me, sometimes if I would like really fantasize about this kind of stuff, like I get torn between like some kind of like telekinesis or whatever, because I like the idea of being able to fly, or possibly like a big one for me is shapeshifting, like because but like a really extreme shapeshifting, like where I don't know, I had control over my body's very atoms, so that I could literally become someone else and like walk in their shoes, like from a physical standpoint. And I think sometimes that's a little bit all you need, but like to put yourself into someone's position for a little while. So not, everyone gets this thing where like shapeshifters, they're not trustworthy. Like someone wants to be a shapeshifter. Ooh, that says something about them. So no. I think shapeshifting can be the most pure expression of empathy, because you can literally be anyone, and that doesn't necessarily mean someone who's got it better off than you. So yeah, I kind of feel like I would, if my superhero character would probably have some kind of extreme version of shape changing as part of their power set.
I feel like I hear that one a lot from queer people.
Because like shape changing speaks a lot to the queer experience on a number of levels, I think. Like from body positivity issues to the idea of wanting to be able to pass and live an easier life in that respect and things like that. So like I think queer people kind of relate to the idea of shapeshifting in a number of different ways. So yeah, it wouldn't entirely surprise me if it comes up often when interviewing queer people. That
It's
and like
great.
some sort of like Phoenix level powers, like you, because it'll either be the people who want to do the shape shifting, or maybe the people who are just like, I just want to burn everything.
Right on. Yeah, I could totally understand that too.
Oh yeah, couldn't blame them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Joe, you have been an absolutely fabulous guest
Oh,
on this show, and I can't thank you enough for coming by. It has been an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you.
oh, it's been a pleasure to do this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It really, really has been really lovely.
Where can people find you and your projects on the internet?
So the big ones, social media wise, on Twitter, I am at Joseph Glass. On Instagram, I'm at Joe Glass. So it's Joe Glass, all one word. But I have a website at joeglasscomics.co.uk. And most of my comics, in fact, all of my comics, I don't know why I said most, all of my comics can be found on ComiXology. If you go in the search bar and search any of their titles, or like queer comics with an X instead of CS at the end, then you should see them all come up. Probably if you search my name as well, actually, because the ComiXology search function is pretty good like that. And coming in February, we'll be launching a new Kickstarter for a new book called The Miracles, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, I'll be needing all the help I can get on that one. So yeah, check out The Miracles. There's a pre-launch page on Kickstarter now where you can actually set a notification reminder so that as soon as the campaign starts, you'll know immediately.
Oh, so one last thing.
Oh yeah.
Do you have a speculative question you would like to ask my audience?
Ooh. Give me an example. Like what kind of ones have you had in the past? Like, because I don't want to retread something someone's already asked.
Yeah, no problem. So the last one that I recorded was, if you were a space pirate, how do you feel about dinosaur writing in space?
Ooh.
That was one of them. I haven't been doing this for very long. I've only done a couple. So
Yeah.
that's the one that really comes to mind so far.
But
Oh,
it's definitely a very different one, that. So
now what kind of music did you listen to while beating up baddies if you were a superhero? That went over pretty well.
that's kind of cool. I suppose I tell you what would be like a really interesting one, because it'd be interesting to see what people thought if they were to make LGBTQ superhero movie.
Ooh,
How would you want the tone to be? Like, would you want it to be a Zack Snyder-esque, grim, gritty slugfest, but just with queer characters, or would you want something which was maybe a bit more bright and positive and colorful? Like, oh god, there haven't been that many superhero movies that really match bright, colorful. Oh, maybe like a Guardians of the Galaxy, but like super queer. Like, what
there you
kind
go.
of tone would people
Or
want to
Super
see?
Gay Shazam, maybe.
Hmm?
Or Super Gay Shazam, maybe.
Oh yeah, but that would be awesome as well, because that film was really good and honestly one of the best DCEU films so far, to be honest. But yeah, I think that would be really interesting to see where people see the tone for like a LGBTQ superhero movie to go. Would it be grim dark, grim gritty, or would it be something bright and colorful and positive? So yeah, I think that'd be interesting. People to think about like what do they want out of a LGBTQ superhero film?
And now, your tweets. Gracie Cosplays says, I'm intrigued. Jim Seals says, I would do a 90s pulp adventure. Protagonist is bisexual. As a civilian, he's straight. Whereas once he dons the domino mask, he's empowered to explore his sexuality. Narrative focuses on his awakening, concluding with him claiming all aspects of his sexual self. Anthony Gramuglia says, make it a teen coming-of-age story with a bisexual lead with 2 love interests, one of whom is a cat person. Friend and former guest Doug Kane says, probably depends on the superhero. Midnighter would have a different feel than North Star, who would have a different feel than Harley Quinn, who would have a different feel than Star-Lord. The character determines the feel. Their sexuality is merely one aspect of the person. Don't Axe says, it'll be an action comedy. an odd couple buddy film, like Tango and Cash or Hancock. Cyberpink City says, secret agent, plenty of sex, violence, and assassination attempts. Drew, the Savage Ape Man, says, a May-December romance between a seasoned crime fighter and a devil-may-care thrill seeker. They operate in the shadows of a candy-colored world of bizarre criminals and evil masterminds. I like that one. Let's hope 2020 doesn't end on a cliffhanger, says. It's a goofy caper movie based on 90s Excalibur, except Kitty and Rachel are an actual couple, and the Soul Sword is annoyed by this because the Soul Sword is part of Aaliyah. Dr. Butcher MD says, a classical superhero movie in the Donner mold about a superhero who is openly gay and doesn't care what anybody thinks because they have stuff to do like saving the world and being in love. Maybe use the Dark Knight Returns device of having the media and the man on the street debating this while the superhero completely ignores it and stays on the job while they handle personal business. Wasn't Joe amazing? God, I love that guy. For more information on Joe Glass, where to find him, and all of his links, look no further than the description of this podcast or video. Titular Characters is a show about the things we love. It's developed and produced by Eva Webb. That's me. Podcast art by Alexiva, who is perfect and beautiful. Theme song by Antonia Marquis. Sound mixing by Brogan Malloy. Dramatic tweet music by Will Rosati. Check out his YouTube channel. Bumper music for the credits by Aaron Canning. Want to get involved in the action? We post speculative questions once a week on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at EvaIsAdorable. And when you see the question pop up, leave those comments. Give me your words. Did you know that I'm offering free hug gifts for every positive review on iTunes and Podchaser? It's true. Just leave a review, tweet it at me on Twitter, and I will find a totally beautiful free hug gift and send it in your general direction. See? It's a win-win for everybody. And that's our show. Join us next time for another exciting adventure in cyberspace. Oh, and when you do, bring candy.